colleges are by themselves realizing that it didn't work. They are gradually, all of them are reintroducing the requirement of standardized tests. This memo just probably will hasten that process.
But yeah, students may want to be cautious about in what way they express something. So they probably should not limit themselves from expressing, but in what way they express certain things online, especially of political nature, try to maintain balance and based in truth is what I would suggest.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to HigherEd for Our Horizon, where we unpack the policies, trends, and power shifts that are shaping the global education. So, I'm your host, and today we are diving into one of the most talked about policy moves in American higher education, the Compact for Academic Excellence in Higher Education, a 10-point memo recently sent by the Trump administration to 9 top universities in the US. Now, if you haven't heard about it, this compact isn't just a statement of intent, it's a set of conditions. So these universities are being asked to agree to certain terms in exchange for priority access to federal funding, faster grant approvals, and other institutional advantages. And the catch is, if they don't comply, they could face penalties or even lose some of their existing funding support. We will unpack the whole 10-point memo that we have here today, and Vishal is going to help us with that.
Thank you, Yamini. I'm just going to go through each and every one of the points. We'll try to explain to the audience to the best of our ability what that item number means and how it is going to impact the admission process and how it will impact Indian students in particular, right? Or any Asian student in that way. So the very first point we have is the ban consideration of race and sex in hiring and admission process. So basically what it is similar to it's called affirmative action. It's similar to reservation that colleges have decided to adopt on their own. It's not a mandate from the government. The Ivy League schools and many other schools in the country have figured out that they should figure out a way to create opportunities of upward mobility for people. And it is with an understanding that some people have privilege. Privilege means that they may have, good income, and based on that income, and they may live in an area which has good schools. They may have parents who are already educated, right? So their kids are likely going to do better just because you have a parent at home who's going to be able to teach you. You go to school in a district where schools are better, teachers are better. You also have money available to send your kids to after school programs, sports academies, and all that, extra activities. Obviously, when you are going to apply to colleges, and if you're completely merit based, the person who comes from a privileged background would have gone to a good school. They would have all these extracurricular activities and achievements. They would have better SAT scores because they would have gotten coaching for it, right? And they would have had parents helping them throughout their academic journey, so their scores may also be better. All right. So putting all of that together, if you always give admission to people who have the best profile, you're likely going to have the set of people in society whose children and their grandchildren will be the ones who will go to top schools, and you'll have others who will not be able to get there. So there's not going to be enough upward mobility. In order to achieve that upward mobility, the colleges have little bit lenient standards for people who may not have not been from privileged families. So if they have been in low income families or areas where the schools are poor, even then, if you were among the top of the class, you will likely be considered at one of these Ivy League schools, but you may not have the similar kind of profile as someone who's coming from a wealthy area in San Francisco Bay Area. You may not have the similar kind of extracurricular achievements. You may not have, that good an SAT score. So it's not completely fair in the eyes of people who have better scores, right? So if you go to a completely merit-based system, then such people who don't have privilege are less likely to get admission. So that's what this point talks about. It says that the admission process should be uh, fair in a way that based on whoever's profile is the most impressive should be the one taken into college and admitted to the college. The college people may rebut it by saying that what about upward mobility? Then nobody's going to have upward mobility, right? So that's the first point. They want the colleges to agree to an admission process where the, those criteria are not considered. Also, the colleges have been trying to get underrepresented groups such as females to get into certain streams. So historically, we may have seen that very few girls get into mathematics and engineering and computer science. And for many years, colleges have wanted to encourage women to get into these technical fields. So it is possible that the colleges were giving preferences to female applicants who were applying in these fields for them to be accepted in the college because they wanted to increase the number of women participation. So that's also been they have also asked that not to be considered, right? So ban on consideration of sex in hiring and admission, sex and race both. So we talked about the race. Races, underrepresented races would be they would be lenient towards them, and the overrepresented races they would be strict towards them. And this has also gone to Supreme Court because the Asian people usually score better in competitive exams, and they are usually the um, ethnic group who makes good income in the US. They are among the richest in terms of ethnic groups, in terms of family income. So they are able to afford a lot of activities and coaching and all that for their children, and their children's profiles are usually pretty good. And keeping that in mind, they do get discriminated. Asians do get discriminated when it comes to admission to top colleges, right? So it went all the way to Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said you cannot discriminate that way. But there is a feeling among people in the administration and also in the public that even though the Supreme Court ruling has come out, the colleges might be figuring out different ways, but to still achieve the same outcome, right? So that's why I believe that they have put it here. Impact on Indian students. What do you think, Suchin, will be an impact on Indian students, someone who's applying from
I
India?
think so. I think it's about balance there in this particular policy, and it's probably trying to balance something that was tilting one way earlier. Overall, I think this doesn't have a very significant impact, but it does have a little bit of a benefit given the recent trends of discrimination against Asian students. The other thing that I find which is interesting is now they need to publish this publicly, anonymized. So then there's no room for debate. Anything that's happening will be visible, which is, I think, in a way, good for everyone.
Yeah, so there are some people may think it is good because it brings transparency and clarity and less bias in the system, right? If you are comparing applicants, apples to apples comparison of applicants, you obviously will be picking the best applicant as it is on paper, right? And then you have to publish the data, then people will feel more assured that there was no bias there. When it comes to Indian students typically who come apply from abroad usually have good scores, right? They also have done many other activities because in India people push their kids to do a lot more. So I think this will be helpful for Indians, whether they are Indian Americans living in the US or Indians applying from India, right? Because Indian Americans have already been getting discriminated utilizing this particular affirmative action policy. So if that discrimination is not there, they are likely to fare better. But like as I said earlier, the colleges also have their point of upward mobility, which is not going to be.
Um, Moving on to the next point is the cap on international enrollment. So, under this compact, the US universities would be required to limit international undergraduates to 15% of their total student body, with no more than 5% coming from a single country. That's a major shift. So, if this policy goes into effect, competition could tighten dramatically, not just for admissions, but for scholarships and research opportunities too. So, can we talk a little bit about this and
Yeah,
how it will impact Indian students?
I do not think it is going to be that big of an impact as people perceive it to be, right? general impression people have is that, oh, there are so many international students and most of them are Indian. When I looked at the data, it didn't come out to be that way. I mean, as the policy is written, it seems like it is particularly targeting undergraduate student body. And in the undergraduate student body, I found out whichever college had data published. And if you look at just that data and try to analyze what percentage of the students come from India, it is less than 5%. It's around 3.5% ish, maybe 4%. So if we see the number of applicants that are applying today is going to continue in the future, you're not going to see any difference. In fact, if the college admission process becomes more apples to apples comparison merit based, you may get more Indians may take complete 5% compared to 3 or 4% it may be today, right? But if they apply the same policy to graduate applicants, that's where the problem will come for Indian students, because the graduate applicants, Indian students who get admitted add up to around 9 to 10% of the student base from the data that we have. So if we extrapolate that to that, it will be similar in other colleges also. That means say around 10% of the students in graduate schools are Indian students. Then that's a problem, because now only around 5% will get admitted. So then we're looking at only half the students from India being able to come for graduate studies compared to compared to the ones that are able to come today. So Sachin, you have anything to add here?
Yeah. So like you said, Vishal, I think the impact at its current state is minimal, because I think we're looking at these colleges that are currently specified right now, and there the enrollment is already fairly balanced. If this extends to colleges beyond, there may be a challenge for many of them where the enrollment is very skewed. My own personal experience of being in a class with 60 people of international students, largely Indians, and then 5 people local. And in a way, the balance is good for students, because the experience that you get by dealing with people of different culture is beneficial. So there are issues and there are also benefits, but in the current state, I don't think it has that much of an impact. The other thing that I'm not fully sure about is because there is a certain skew in terms of the preference of the streams that Indian students and international students in general have. So when you look at it as graduate entirely, there may be a certain percentage, but certain branches may end up having way more than that percentage. I don't know what kind of an impact that will have, or this has to be reworked based on the results that we have right now.
Yeah, I do not think they have limited it to 5% per branch. I think it's 5% overall. So what will end up happening is that 5% may translate into 30% in STEM branches, right? So that's still likely, unless they tighten it even further to say that in one stream, in one particular class, you need to have diversity of 5% or only 5% students from one country. That's going to severely impact. In fact, even more severely impact the colleges where you see very large number of Indian students apply, like the one Suchin was given an example of. Colleges like the San Jose State, New Jersey Institute of Technology. That these are the colleges, and many others like that are where many Indian people apply from India, and the classes turn out to be majority Indian, right? So if that restriction comes where it's not 5% overall, but it's 5% per class, then that's going to significantly impact the graduate students coming.
Because I think in the given list, I think Arizona and University of Southern California are a little bit in that zone when it comes to master's students. The other thing that I look
feel
at,
that if this had been accepted, this is a compact because the colleges have to accept it. If this had been accepted by colleges, my gut feeling tells me this would not stay limited to just these colleges. So what's the point of just having it for some colleges? That's like a testing ground to see how does it go with these colleges, and if it gets accepted, then we'll ask every single college to agree to the same, right? So I think whoever is listening to this should assume that if it is going to be accepted by these colleges, is likely going to be adopted by other colleges also.
But
But
MIT
so
did
far,
reject
the
it.
colleges are showing resistance. They are not accepting it. That's another caveat we have to mention, that colleges are not accepting it. But it is also, they have given a deadline for people to respond or comment on it. I think there's a deadline for colleges to respond to it, and there's a deadline for colleges to sign it. So the response deadline means that, okay, if you are not okay with every single one of these criteria, maybe there is some room for negotiation. Right? I think with Trump policies, we have always seen that he will ask for something most extreme, and then they will settle somewhere in the middle, right? So I feel that this is going to go through the similar process where many of the colleges will respond. They will reject it initially. They will respond that, hey, we are not okay with many of these things, and they will come to an agreement, and then there will be something watered down version of the same that will get adopted across.
All right. Moving on to the next point on the memo list, there's standardized testing mandate. So this memo calls for universities to bring back SAT and ACT scores and possibly even newer options like the classic learning test. For Indian students, this might actually bring a small silver lining. Restoring standardized testing can make admissions more transparent for students applying from outside the US. So, can we talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, standardized testing lost its appeal among colleges shortly before the pandemic, and then pandemic became an opportunity for them to um, do away with them, right? So the reasoning that was given at that time was people will not be able to go take standardized tests. Let's accept people without it. People can apply without it, and they will be considered based on other criteria. But standardized testing is the only way you can give the similar test to everybody, irrespective of whatever college whatever school they're coming from, whatever part of the country they're from, or whatever part of the world they're from, right? So in a way, standard testing is the fairest merit-based system that you can have to gauge the capability of someone to admit in a college where there is severe intense competition, right? And then another thing that the colleges have already realized is that the ones now the cohorts in which they did not have the standardized testing, the students are not faring as well in college compared to the cohorts before where the standardized testing was there. So colleges are by themselves realizing that it didn't work. They are gradually, all of them are reintroducing the requirement of standardized tests. This memo just probably will hasten that process, that the standardized tests are going to come back. The concern with standardized tests among these colleges was that, again, the privileged college students will get coaching. They will understand the pattern of the test. They will rehearse and practice it over and over again, and they will fare better. That doesn't clearly indicate that the student is better. It's just that they are good test takers because of the practice they have done, and the practice was done with the help of coaches, which the lower income family or underprivileged people may not be able to afford. It's a nice ideal way of thinking about it, but in reality it doesn't work, because if you don't have a standardized test, then you are relying on other criteria, and other criteria are school grades and activities which are very subjective, right? You could have gone to a private school in some part of the world where the school may have given A grades to everybody. How do you compare that against a student where they have gone to a school which has been pretty strict at their grading, right? Then you would have at least the standardized test to normalize that and figure out who's better than other, right? So the quality of students you are able to get in significantly improves when you have a standardized test, in my opinion. And that's what the colleges are realizing also, and this memo also is reinforcing that. And Indian students usually do better because they are used to taking tests throughout their life. India is a test preparation based society, right? So, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a benefit, like you said, for Indians, because here at the numbers that we have to deal with, there is no other way to really make do it as objective as possible. And I don't think there has been any sort of complaints on any direction on it in India, because I think everybody is on the same page over here. So I think, yeah, it remains a good way to at least get that first batch filtered, and then you can go pursue it then with their grades and their activities, and then further understand, what how the
Yeah.
students are to be taken in.
And standardized testing, I as have observed the admission process for years and years, I've realized that how important it is, because there are lots of people who are also gaming the admission system, right? Again, privileged people can hire these consultants for tens of thousands of dollars a year. Some of them are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to consultants who can shape your profile to match what the college is looking for. And in many cases, the projects that the students are claiming to have done, which puts them ahead of everybody else because there is nobody to proctor whether you did it by yourself or not. I have a feeling that those looking just the way looking at the projects, but there's a strong feeling we as teachers know that this is not the student who would have done it,
I
right?
was actually going
Somebody
to
else
bring
would have done it for them. So now, without standardized testing, you are allowing this gaming of the system, and requiring it actually brings integrity back into the system.
I was actually going to ask this just for our viewers as well. SATs and ACTs or any standardized testing are usually required for undergraduate programs, right? Not for a master's or a graduate level program. So, especially this happens a lot in masters, and I know a lot of people who have done this to get admissions in good universities in the US. So, yeah, that definitely exists. I agree with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have to have a proctored, recognized, trusted exam, which can allow you to do apples to apples comparison. Otherwise, there will be many people who will take advantage of the flexibility. Majority will not take advantage, but there's those bad apples will get encouraged and they will do it.
All right. Moving to the next point is the tuition freeze. The memo asks universities to hold tuition steady for the next 5 years. If that goes through, it could help address one of the biggest concerns for Indian families. That's obviously the affordability of these courses. However, with limits on international enrollment and potential funding constraints, some experts warn that universities might offset cost in other ways, possibly reducing aid or scholarship for non-US students. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, the US increase in tuitions has far exceeded inflation for many years. Even when the inflation used to be 2 to 3%, the tuitions would grow up by around 7 8%. And you do that compounding over a period of time like 10, 20, 30 years, you can imagine how much the tuitions have increased. And these tuitions have increased at these top tier colleges who don't even need the money because they have so much endowment money, right? They're but people are willing to pay because of the prestige to get into the college, right? So this forces them to not to increase the fee for 3 years. I don't think it's, I mean, the colleges that they have sent this compact to, I don't think it's a big deal for them because they're not the colleges who will struggle because they're not able to increase the fee. The fee is already pretty high, right? But another thing people need to know is that many of these top tier colleges like MIT and Harvard and others, they may already have a policy which they may have come up with in last few years that anyone making below a certain amount, some of the colleges have that amount is $150,000, some of them have it 200,000, some of them have 75,000. Anyone making below that threshold as a family, they have not been charging them any tuition, so that tuition is completely free for them. This is again goes to that idea that you want to create opportunities of upward mobility in the society. So if there's a good student from a family who cannot afford the tuition, but they are at that level where they could get an admission at MIT, then that person doesn't have to worry about, oh, it's too expensive and I will not go to MIT. That person can just come in and they won't have to worry about tuition. So that upward mobility, that's an area where the colleges have been very focused on for many years, is being able to create these opportunities of upward mobility, and that's why the tuition is not there. And then many of the colleges are need blind. That means that they will not consider who you are when they are assigning this scholarship for someone not to pay tuition. That means that many of these colleges will offer this tuition waiver even to people coming from other countries, including India. Considering Indian, there's a huge salary arbitrage between US and India, and people in India in US dollars do not make a lot of salary, a lot of income is not there. Most families from India qualify for a tuition waiver because $200,000 is a lot of money. 200,000 is what, like, 1.6 crores. How many families in India make to 1.6 crores, right? Or even if it is less, like 150,000, that's still a lot of money. So if somebody from India gets admission at one of these top tier colleges, then they won't have to worry. I mean, my understanding is that they won't have to worry about tuition. The tuition is going to be covered by the college.
Yeah, this is an area I feel that there are at least a couple of good things that are happening. I think the freeze on the tuition rates for 5 years definitely a good thing. I do see that there's also something related to universities which have large endowments must also provide free tuition for science students. So this again, in these big universities which have large endowments, it will benefit students coming from India specifically who take up the science majors a lot. I also see that there's a requirement for them to post the graduate earnings by the major, which is supposed to allow students to pick majors with a better ROI. That can go either way, because then people start favoring one and then you lose out certain specializations from the college, which is already happening. You can see that in colleges where there is a larger engineering push, there are other fields don't get as much enrollments, don't get as much money as well. The other thing from the tuition point of view, which is good, is that there are refunds that are need to be provided to students who withdraw from courses. Now, this is again particularly useful to Indian students, because if we have seen lately some cases of getting acceptances from colleges, but then visas being rejected, in which case then at least you don't end up losing the money that you may have paid towards the tuition.
Yeah, the tuition freeze, I think, will benefit when they apply the same, in case this gets accepted and it gets applied to other colleges also. I think that's where the benefit of tuition fees will be taken advantage of by Indian students, because like these top colleges are also have decided they are not going to charge tuition, right? But there are people from India don't only go to top college; they go to colleges, of variety of rankings, top tier to mid tier to low tier, right? And mid tier to low tier colleges are not typically giving tuition waivers. That's where you have to pay, as an international student, you have to pay more, way more than what the regular local student would have paid. And if they can uh, put a cap on tuition increase there also, that's the benefit that the Indian students will be able to get. So this is a good one for Indian students and students in general.
Okay, finally, there are like a few more points like institutional neutrality and free speech, ensuring a vibrant marketplace of ideas on campus,
Yeah.
restricting employees from expressing political views on behalf of the institution. These extra points, I think, only do uh, apply to the institutions rather than the students, correct?
Yeah, I think what they're trying to do is they are trying to make the institution neutral, but at the same time give students an ability to express their ideas, right? So what has ended up happening, but this is at least the impression of the government, is that um, over time the college professors have taken a certain point of view when it comes to political thought, right? So, and the impression that the government has is that majority of the college professors have become left leaning, right? They're favoring left leaning ideas and left leaning policies and left leaning political parties. And their thought process is that if you're a professor who is somebody you look up to, is going to have left leaning ideas, and he's going to openly advocate and promote those ideas in the way he or she is teaching the course material, you are going to be influenced by their ideas, right? And then you will have a next generation of graduates who have only one point of view, right? The conservative point of view is going to be from non-graduate people who did not go to college, and most of the people who are graduating from college will have a liberal point of view, which is obviously not going to be good for the conservative government, right? It's not going to be good for governments
Hmm.
like the Trump government. They are saying that the colleges should be neutral. When the teacher is expressing his views, they should just do academics. They should let the students figure out and decide and debate, right? In a way, it is good. In a way, it is restricting free speech. So that means you are telling the teachers you don't have free speech. You cannot express what you believe in, right? Um, and in a way, it is good that you are not forcing students to think a certain way. You are giving them freedom to think either way and decide and choose for themselves, and not get influenced by who their mentors or coaches or teachers are.
Yeah. So in here, I think, like I said, it's again a balance, because ideally, as a teacher, our thoughts would be that you want to create a framework, because thoughts are not rigid. It's not that you have a thought and it stays that way. So you need to give the freedom for people to swing and then evolve a mid ground, where they may go this way, they may go that way, they may come back, and then they settle down in the middle, which is that journey. You have to allow the student to have that journey. You can't restrict them on either end as such. And that institution and the teachers provide that framework rather than standing at those poles. But the other small thing which is important for foreign students here, there is an emphasis on alignment with US values during visa vetting. So this is something, and ability to screen out students with anti-American values. So from a country's point of view, I think it's probably good, and I think it could be something that countries already do anyway. Now it's a little more explicit. But yeah, students may want to be cautious about in what way they express something. So they probably should not limit themselves from expressing, but in what way they express certain things online, especially of political nature, try to maintain balance and based in truth is what I would suggest. But it is something to be concerned about for international
Yeah.
students.
I mean, I personally feel that it is contrary to what they just did. They're saying that students should have the ability to think for themselves and figure out what their path is without being influenced. But then you are going to judge them coming in based on, I mean, because it's a very slippery slope, right? Depending on the government that will be ruling America at that time, the values that they're looking for might also change, right? Because it's not clear black and white. It's going to be subjective, and it's going to change based on whoever is in the administration at the time of your admission in the country. So I mean, like Suchin said, the guideline for international student coming to the US as of right now, even though in US was a place where you could just express yourself as freely as you wanted, the guideline is that you have to come here as a student and not think of yourself as an activist. If you have strong ideas about something, do not, you know, do refrain or postpone those ideas to be shared till you graduate and go back to your country, because you don't know whether those ideas align with what the host country is looking for at that time or not.
And a lot of times it's going to be in the hands of an individual at that window behind the glass. So you don't know which way that's going to go.
Not behind the glass during their stay, because you saw that some people were deported just for expressing their ideas on campuses, right? Or during the point of port of entry when you're coming back the next time, right? So when we are in colleges, we start framing our thoughts about what is right, what is wrong, what do I want to stand for, what do I want to fight for. It's okay to build those thoughts, but do not start practicing them till you are already a graduate. Practice them after you already graduated in whatever country you are in at that time, because you don't want to leave your graduation halfway in the middle, like what happened to a lot of people.
Yeah. So the next point is that, can we talk a bit about how the memo also discusses about grade inflation, which technically means that the Trump administration wants universities to audit grading practices and tighten evaluation standards by requiring departments to justify their grading each semester and reviewing faculty who consistently gives very high grades, or introducing external assessments to maintain fairness and accountability. What do you guys think about that?
I think grading has become lenient over time, right? I mean, when we went to college, most of the people would get B's and C's. There were very few students who used to get A's. And as international students, it was not uncommon to find people get below the B average and they would lose their status and they would have to go back to India, or they, in many cases, restarted their degree in a different program, right? And I don't see that happening very much these days because the grading, like you said, has become lenient and people are getting more and more people are getting A's, and now they have even introduced A plus. And why did colleges do that, right? Why did they become lenient? At the end of the day, colleges have become more of a business.
Hmm.
If students do well in a college, they're likely to invite their friends and relatives and others to also apply to the same college. They'll say it's easy to get a good grade here, and with a good grade, you can mention 4.0 on your resume and you're going to get a good job, right? So if the colleges have to compete with each other based on how well their students are getting placed, then it is in their benefit to give students better grades. So having a third party to be the uh, evaluator of how you're grading it is actually is a good thing, as long as it is applied across the board, across all the colleges, right? Then the colleges will not have the sense of competition that, oh, other my competition college is already doing it. If I don't do it, then I'm going to leave my students behind, right? So if it is applied across the board at all the colleges, sooner or later colleges will actually appreciate it, because then you'll have a clearer distinction of who is actually great student, who was a good student, and who was below that level, right? This inflation of grading is a practice that's been somehow adopted across the board, even in India also. When we were in our 10th 12th grades, the scores you didn't used to be the kind people are getting today, and then almost everybody gets in high 90s. High 90s was unheard of, right? So this grade inflation is a problem across the board, all around the world. And some third party needs to come in and say, no, we're going to set it right how it needs to be, how it has been all along. I mean, in my grandfather's generation, people would barely get a first class, right? 60% was so uncommon. Now in my generation, distinction became a rule. Like if you were a good student, you'd get a distinction. That would be 75. And nowadays, if somebody doesn't get a 96, 97, they're not good. And in 10 years from now, what will it be? 99.5, 99.6? That's how it will be like 10 years from now. That's where we will be headed if we go this way. And there'll be no clear way to distinguish. Like the merit, like we were talking about, it should be all merit based. Then it's not really merit based.
Another area which sort of helps Indian students in particular a little bit, or international students, is this non-discriminatory hiring, because it then translates to on-campus jobs, teaching assistantships and research fellowships and things like that. And where there was a trend of it being sort of normalized along with these preferential practices, but I think with this it gives a little better chance for Indian students to secure more of those roles.
All right. So critics are also saying that this could silence diversity and inclusion initiatives, while supporters argue it will restore academic balance. I think we are leaning towards the second part, right, in this panel. So it is safe to say that we are looking at a fairer, more merit-based system, and
But
which
yeah,
is
both have their own merit, right? There's not going to be upward mobility if it is 100% merit based. You will not have a son of a janitor going to Harvard, very less likely, because even if son of a janitor goes to a decent school, gets really good grades, he or she will not have other credentials which the person from a privileged background will have. A privileged background person will not only have good grades, they will have sports done for 10 years, which would have costed their parents $100 an hour in coaching, right? They would have done so many other extracurricular activities, such as coding school for 5 years, where they would have made some incredible projects. They would have started a non-profit, right? They would have applied for some patents, right? While as someone who's from unprivileged background would not even get these ideas, because in the family they are the first generation who's even trying to go to college. Previous generation may not even have gone to college, may not even have gone to finished high school. So for upward mobility, some level of affirmative action is necessary, but at the same time, then you cannot have merit-based, um, unbiased admission, right? So if you want fairness in the system, then upward mobility suffers. If you want upward mobility in the system, then uh, if you want upward mobility in the system, the fairness suffers. So it's a very hard balance to strike. So what ends up happening, the pendulum keeps swinging from one side to the other. So depending on who is in power, who is in the ground.
Hmm. So for Indian students, what do you think are the implications of this if this policy does gets applicable to all universities? What's your advice for them right now?
If so, right now as we see it, it's been it's with 9 universities, but it seems like it is something which is like a boilerplate that may get extended across other colleges as well. So keeping the overall thing in mind, I think the what we see is that the impact on in terms of enrollments on the graduate level courses will be higher, where current enrollment of Indian students is higher, and there may be affected by the cap much more as compared to undergraduate courses. And apart from that, in terms of the fees and other impacts on the on it is actually positive to a large extent. And if it does get implemented in this way, it would be beneficial to students. But overall, given that the numbers of enrollments may come down, you will have to be a lot more clear and precise in the way that you look to apply to these colleges and have clarity on what you're looking to achieve out of it, and maintain a discipline prior and even during and after your course as well.
The undergraduate enrollment for Indian students will likely increase, because if it's more merit based and 5% limit on applicants from one country, I feel that it will hit that 5% limit because it will be more merit based, right? So the undergraduate students currently around 3 to 4% from India. If we look at the colleges where the data is published, which are usually top tier colleges, and if it goes to 5%, that means more people will be able to get in. However, at graduate level, it's going to be half of what it is currently, right? So if a parent or a student wants to get that top tier college brand on their resume, like the brand of, say, Yale or Harvard or MIT, you may not want to wait for that master's. As many times the parents in India say, oh, I'm not going to send my kid for a bachelor's degree to the US. It's too expensive. I have to pay for 4 years of tuition. I would rather send him or her for master's. It's only 2 years. At the end of the day, master's degree from Harvard, and your career is set, because then that's on your resume. That's great, but you may not be able to get into Harvard and master's, because now there's going to be half the chances of getting in. So I would recommend, if people have the means and to send their kids abroad for bachelor's level, try in bachelor's level also. Now, as long as you have a degree from Harvard, whether a bachelor's or master's, is going to add value to your resume, irrespective of whether it was a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. So many people who may not have thought about applying at the bachelor's level should think about applying at the bachelor's level also. As I mentioned earlier, there is a high likelihood in many colleges you may qualify for full tuition waiver, because recent policies from top colleges like MIT and others have mentioned that anyone whose family income is below a particular threshold doesn't pay tuition. And in India, most people don't make that kind of money.
All right. So that wraps up our Trump's compact for academic excellence and what it could mean to international students. For Indian students, staying updated on these shifts is more important than ever. You've been listening to HigherEd Horizon, where thank you, and we will see you in the next episode.